Hey, hello. Welcome back, spring breakers. Yeah, quarantine is fun, isn't it? Well, got me a haircut, continuing my quarantine beard, being bored, teaching my kids 4 plus 4 and teaching one how to read. I could never be an elementary school teacher. Drive me crazy. Anyway, so we're back. Some more of the same. I'm going to go through some slides and some lecture, um, and I will then tell you at the end. It's the same. I'm trying to keep these slides the same so they're consistent. You know that you have to look through slides, answer a couple of questions in the speaker notes. Then you usually have something called a guided practice, which is something that you have to actually do and turn in, right? So you're going through these notes and listening to me explain them a little bit so you can do well on the quizzes and the tests, because the quizzes and the tests come directly from these slides. You are also going to be handing in the work at the end every day. So we had to write something about GMOs. Today it's just a quick paragraph on pesticides. So pesticides are kind of an interesting topic because we are still talking about agriculture. We're still talking about growing food, all that fun stuff. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go over to the slides like we usually do, right? More of the same. I'm going to go through the slides. I have the chat area up in case you want to say hi. I understand that there are not usually too many people live, which is okay. I know you guys are busy, but if you do need to talk with me live, then I'll be doing this every day so you can get to me, or every day that we meet. We're still on the same schedule. I'm still following everything. Heard from Mr. Reyes. He said that grading policy is still the same. Your grades are not due until the end of this week, I think. You should be keeping an eye on those and making sure that I'm putting everything in. And another quick reminder, if you do something late, many of you caught up over the week off, which was great. If you do something and trying to get rid of one of those zeros, if you do get rid of something, you need to private message me. I've been saying that over and over. You need to private message me so I get an email from you saying, hey, I did this. And then I can, once I get that private message, then I know you did it, or else I'll never know. I'll never go back. I'll never check. So I need you to make sure that that's a big responsibility on your end. All right. You should have the slides up. The only thing we had today in the materials was the slides and the daily attendance. Don't forget, attendance is huge. So we have land and water use. We're still in Unit 4 where we're talking about agriculture and stuff like that, and water. And we are talking about Lesson 6, which is what are the costs and benefits of pesticide use, right? So that is the title. And we're going to go through pesticides and look a little about the good and the bad and this and that. So I'm moving to slide 2. Slide 2 is just the agenda as usual. So you look at that at your leisure. Slide 3 is a review. So that's talking, there's a cool link to it. But that's talking more about desertification. So we talked about that last time. Remember, if we don't have irrigation, or if we use the water that's too salty, you can turn the dirt, the nutritious soil into desert, into dead dirt that doesn't have enough to grow anything, right? So that's a review. You guys can check that out. I'm looking at slide 4. That is the objectives and the intro. So after this lesson, you should be able to explain the costs and benefits of pesticide use, right? So that's good. So we're moving to slide 5. Slide 5 is the first real slide. And it just says a pesticide. You need to know what a pesticide is, right? A lot of people consider it poison or whatever. But a pesticide is any substance used to kill, repel, or control a certain form of plant or animal life that are considered to be pests, right? It's pesticide. Get rid of the pests. It doesn't, pesticides, a lot of pesticides are poisonous. A lot of pesticides are poisonous to some things and not others. So don't just think of pesticide as, oh, it's poison. It is to certain things. Some pesticides are poisonous to everything. So you'll get into that and you'll research that. Move on to slide 6. This is a small one. Do I need to bring it up full screen? Pesticides include herbicides. Herbicides are for destroying weeds and other unwanted vegetation. So, the weed killers, the grass killers, stuff like that. That's all called herbicides, right? Herb means herb means vegetation. So an herbicide kills all kinds of vegetation. Then you have insecticides, happens to be my favorite Nirvana album, Insecticide. Insecticides are for controlling a wide variety of insects. So we know that we have insecticides to get rid of all the pests that may be in our gardens or maybe in our house, right? Kind of ants, stuff like that. Fungicides. Fungicides are used to prevent the growth of mold and mildew. So there are many products out there that have fungicides in them. So if you're spraying them in your bathtub, if you ever have this spray in your bathtub, the mildew remover and stuff, that has fungicides in it, which will kill some of that mildew. And then there's disinfectants. Disinfectants is the most popular one that you guys come in contact with most, and that's for preventing the spread of bacteria. So that's just disinfectants that you think about, squirt bottles, Lysol, stuff like that. Those are also considered pesticides. So that's what I mean by when you think pesticide, you go right to, which is really correct. You go right to all that horrible poison on the crops and this and that, right? But disinfectants are a type of pesticide too. They just happen to kill bacteria, right? All right. There is a cool sound bite. There's a couple of sound clips in here. It's only a couple of minutes, but it explains pesticides. So I want you to listen to that sound bite when you go through these again, or maybe you went through them before I'm talking now, and maybe you already clicked on it. But these sound bites are very, very helpful. Moving on to slide 7. Okay, so costs and benefits, right? So it says here, although many pesticides remain in plants or soils and break down over time, pesticides and their byproducts may sometimes drift in the air and flow through the soil and water. Sometimes they can bioaccumulate or even get passed on generationally from mom to baby, right? So what that means is pesticides. You spray pesticides, you put pesticides on crops, and a lot of the times they will break down. But a lot of the times they move into the soil, right? And if they move into the soil, they move into the water cycle. So pesticides can be floating or flowing anywhere in the air. And what happens is, and we'll talk about amounts of pesticides, but pesticides will be in the air or in the soil or in your water. And as you ingest them or as you come in contact with them, they bioaccumulate, which means they accumulate over time. So you could end up with a lot of pesticide in your cells or something, just by doing natural things, being around. If there's a lot of pesticides in the air, so there's a bioaccumulation. That's the scary part. Maybe not the exact amount they're using right now, but over time, this stuff doesn't break down fast enough, and it accumulates, and it can be dangerous. Slide also says, because of the widespread use of agricultural chemicals in food production, people are exposed to low levels of pesticide residues through their diets. Pretty much any kind of vegetable, any kind of fruit that you eat, unless organic, and we'll talk about that in a second, has pesticides on them. These people are growing things outside. There are pests. There are things that eat their crops. They don't want them to eat their crops. So they are going to use chemical means if they have to. Many, many farms, especially large-scale farms, are going to use chemical means to try to control these pests. They wash them maybe before they get to the store. You ever see the guy in the vegetable aisle, the produce aisle, spraying stuff down with water as well? It just doesn't all come off. Some of it soaks in, depending on what fruit or vegetable you're talking about. And even when you bring it home, if you scrub them or if you wash them with soap and water, a lot of times that's very helpful. But still, it's hard to get every tiny, tiny molecule of pesticide residue out of food. So we just end up accumulating them in our system through our diets. All right. So moving on to slide 8. The EPA sets limits. So we have the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and they set limits on the maximum amount of each pesticide that can be on each food item. All right. So they'll say, okay, if you're going to use pesticide, A, right? Pesticide A, you can only have this much total amount on any food at one given time. And they test that and make sure that there's not any more on it, because any more could be dangerous, right? The problem with that is they don't limit the different number of pesticides that can be on your food, or the total amount of contamination. So you can only use this much pesticide A on all your food. Okay. You can only use this much pesticide B on your food. Okay. You can only use this much pesticide C. So the farmers won't break pest. They won't go over the amount of pesticide A because they can get in trouble, or industry, I should say. So they'll take pesticide A and pesticide B and pesticide C and put them together. So now they're all in legal doses, legal amounts, safe amounts, but they're using 3 of them, and there's the total pesticide is what you have to worry about, because they're not so concerned with, okay, don't go over the limit of A and B and C. The combination of them isn't regulated, so they could be using 3 or 4 different pesticides in small amounts, and that could equal a large amount. There is another sound clip here which talks about that. I kind of like this. I'm going to go full screen so I can see this. But this picture in slide 8 that tells you about the, oops, trying to go full screen and it's just really slow. I'm lagging here, as my Minecraft son would say. All right, so I'm presenting in full mode here. Give me a second. And the picture in slide 8 is what I'm focusing on. The picture in slide 8 says pesticides in produce, right? So there's the dirty dozen, and then there's the cleanest 12, right? So on the left-hand side there, you see the dirty dozen. This is the produce that either absorbs or contains more pesticides, when generally speaking, when you go to the store and buy them. So you're looking at peaches, apples, peppers, celery, nectarines, strawberries, cherries. A lot of them, see, and this is what kind of confused me a little bit. I thought things that were porous would be more prone to pesticides. And that's true, like strawberries, they have the little pores in them, right? And celery is very absorbent. I was thinking the more absorbent, right? But then I'm looking at things like bell peppers and apples and cherries. They all have a slick coating that doesn't look like it's penetrable, right? It looks like it would protect it. Lettuce, you could see getting in there, right? Spinach, you can see getting in there. And even potatoes, right? They would absorb. So I'm thinking of most of the stuff that absorbs would be very susceptible to getting pesticides in them. But then I look at the 12 cleanest, and I'm thinking, wait a second, no, because there's plenty of things on the right-hand side that are porous. You have cabbage and broccoli, right? You have all this stuff. So it wasn't a does it have a skin or does it not have a skin thing. I think what it is when you look at the left-hand side, the worst ones, these are the ones that tend to have more pests. They have insects that prefer them, apples with worms, right? And all of these on the left-hand side are more susceptible to pests, where the ones on the right, onions, there's not too many pests that bother onions because they don't like the taste of them, right? So avocados, where do they grow? Where they grow, there's not too many pests. So you have to look at that, right? And I think it had to do with that. So what they're saying in this sign is that if you're going to buy those 12 worst on the left, you should probably buy them organic. The ones on the right, you don't have to worry so much about organic, right? What I don't see here, oh, bananas. Bananas, you don't have to buy organic, okay? I always buy organic ones for my son, but I guess I'm going to stop that because it's going to be cheaper not to. Anyway, let me shrink this back down. It takes a second, so I'll slurp my coffee. And moving on to slide 9. Slide 9 talks about more costs and benefits, right? And these are just a couple of facts. 3% of Americans tested by the CDC, we all know about CDC nowadays, right? Tested by the CDC had metabolites of the banned chlorpyrifos, which is an insecticide. It's a neurotoxin, a neurotoxic insecticide in their urine. So this is a banned pesticide. Right? You're not allowed to use it. The EPA says you can't use it. CDC, you cannot use this pesticide because it's dangerous. It's a neurotoxin, right? Neurotoxin, a lot of neurotoxins are in snake venom, right? And have a lot of neurotoxins. They paralyze you. Botox is a type of neurotoxin. And that's what you're doing. If you put in Botox, or maybe I need a little right here. If you put in Botox or something, you are actually, it's a neurotoxin. It's actually paralyzing your muscles, and it's making them appear more stiff and more uplifted. What the hell you do when you're trying to look pretty or something. So that's weird. 3% of Americans tested had this banned insecticide in their urine. This one's even worse. DDT. DDT is the worst pesticide, historically speaking. DDT hasn't been used in the U.S. since 1972. All right. DDT is one, and you can look it up real quick. We don't have any slides on it, but you can look it up. It's real easy. DDT was responsible for many, many birth defects. DDT was a horrible pesticide that caused a lot of damage. So much so that in 72, back when nobody really cared about things, they knew how bad it was, and they said, we got to stop this. We got to stop it right away. But here's the freaky thing. Even though DDT hasn't been used in the US since 1972, 99% of Americans tested positive for DDT degradants, meaning as it degraded, there are pieces of this in our systems, in our urine. That's weird, right? What does that mean? To me, to me, that means that people are still using it on the down low, or people have corporations that were selling this stuff and being rich. Maybe they rebranded it. Maybe they changed the name of it. Maybe they changed the chemical composition just a little bit, right, to make it safer. Who knows? But we still get that stuff in our systems. It's crazy. Scientists have not, they don't have a clear understanding of the health effects of pesticide residues. So pesticides themselves are toxic pesticides, right? But residues, meaning the stuff left on the fruit, the stuff left on the vegetables, and you can taste it. Sometimes, like I'll go to Wawa on the way to work, and I'll pick up grapes, and when you eat them, you can taste the chemicals on them. It's disgusting. So, yeah, we're not really sure how much damage, but they're linked to things like cancer. They're linked to all kinds of crazy diseases, neurodegenerative diseases and stuff like that. So it's a big deal, pesticides. All right, slide 10. What are the costs and benefits? Pesticides can have a cumulative toxic loading. That's what we're talking about, a bioaccumulation in the immediate and long term. And each person accumulates and responds to chemicals in a different way. And because we all, our systems all work just a little bit differently. So they're saying that you can have this toxic loading, meaning if you're eating a lot of vegetables or eating a lot of produce or eating a lot of something that may have been had pesticide use on it, or even not. Remember, it floats around in the air. It's in our water. You could, if your system's not one of those systems that can flush it out easily and can get rid of it as a fast moving metabolism, you could be toxic loading. A lot of this can build up in your system. Evidence also suggests that children are very susceptible to adverse effects from exposure to pesticides, including neurodevelopmental effects. So, brain, think neurons, think brain firing, think muscular, right? All of these things. You can have a lot of problems in the development if kids are exposed to a lot of pesticides, which it's almost impossible not to be. It's very strange. All right, slide 11. An entire class of pesticides, they're called organophosphates, have been linked to higher rates of ADHD in children. All right, so here's some of the specific ones. The herbicide atrazine, found in 94% of our water supply, has been linked to birth defects and infertility and cancer. Right? Women exposed to a certain pesticide called endosulfan during pregnancy are more likely to have autistic children. Girls exposed to DDT before puberty are 5 times more likely to develop breast cancer. So what's the point of all this? The point of all this is pesticides do their job by getting rid of pests and by helping us grow crops and have successful agriculture. But there's a lot of these pesticides which don't just hurt the pests, right? If it's designed to kill an animal, and we're animals, it's going to affect us too. Maybe because we're bigger, maybe because we're less susceptible to it, but it doesn't mean that it's not going to cause these side issues. So all of these, and these are popularly used pesticides, right? So how do you get away from that? I don't really know how you get away from that, but it's scary. I mean, these are the main things in our society, like, right? Cancer, breast cancer for women, cancer, infertility for couples, birth defects, ADHD, autism. These are all huge. These are all hugely prevalent in our day, in our society today, and you got to wonder why, right? It's kind of interesting. Slide 12. Pests develop a resistance. So sometimes pesticide use, even if it's bothering us and all, sometimes it's not even useful on the crops. There's something called pesticide resistance, right? That's when the pests evolve to become, it's like antibiotic resistance, which you learned in bio. Eventually, the bacteria will become resistant to the antibiotic you're using against them, right? Well, because they evolve so fast. Same with pests. A lot of pests can evolve pesticide resistance, so that certain pesticide isn't going to work against them anyway. And here's a little bit of evidence on slide 12. It says in the 1940s, farmers in the USA lost about 7% of their crops to pests. Okay, that was using pesticides. While since 1980, or in the 80s, so 40 years later, the percentage lost has increased to 13%. So it went from 7 to 13% of their crops lost, even though they're using the same pesticides. So that means the pests are evolving away to not be as affected by the pesticides. And that's even with more pesticides being used. So the amount that they're using is increasing, and it's still they're not susceptible to it. So and then it says at the bottom there, an estimated 500 pests have developed resistance since the 1940s. So they're going to evolve too, just like everything else. So they're evolving ways to do that. So that is basically the slides. What do you do? I don't even know what you do, right? Well, so some of y'all are going to be like, oh, just don't eat produce and don't eat vegetables. We need that. And that's in everything. And it's not just in produce and vegetables. That's where it's most prevalent because that's what we're growing, right? But think about corn, right? Corn is in everything. Not just corn when you're eating corn, but corn is used in everything. Wheat is used in everything, right? So if pesticides are being used on these crops, they're finding their way into everything, not just the apple or the banana. So it's really impossible to get away from it. Even if you're buying organic bananas and organic apples and organic all this, because we don't want pesticide on them, you're not. Are you buying? Are you looking at every ingredient in every bread you buy, everything you buy that made sure that they used all organic ingredients? It's kind of hard to do when you go out to eat, whatever. So it's really hard to keep pesticides out of your system. Anyway, excuse me. When we go to the guided practice, I need a sip of coffee here. Guided practice has 2 videos. They are very interesting. I want you to watch them. So you kind of have a couple things to do on your own over this next half hour. And that is watch the 2 sound clips throughout the slides. There's those 2 couple of minute sound clips to talk about pesticides. There's this phenomenon called pesticide drift on slide 13. The YouTube clip. So watch that YouTube clip. It's only 2 minutes. Be Aware is interesting, and Shaolin would love that because it's about bees. That's 4 minutes, and that's also another way, pesticides and bees, because we already know we need bees, and one of the problems is pesticides. So I'll let you check that video out. Both those videos are very cool. It's only a few minutes, so watch them. And you never know if one of those question on the quiz is going to ask about a video, so just make sure you put them on. And then the independent practice. This is an easy one today. We're back. It's not too much to do. So your slides, a couple of videos, a couple of sound clips, and then a paragraph, kind of. What you're doing is you are researching a pesticide of your choosing. Right? So if you want to choose DDT, that's cool. DDT is a very popular one, a very historically significant one, or you can find one off the beaten path. All you got to do is Google, pesticides, dangers, or whatever, and it'll probably list a bunch of them and tell you what can happen. Dive into it a little. Don't just copy and paste me one definition or sentence. Dive into it just a little bit. So research a pesticide. What is it intended to do? So in your paragraph, in your 4 sentences, you are explaining what it's intended to do, the name of the pesticide, what it's intended to do, and then you're going to look at the possible benefits and possible costs of this. Okay. And then you are going to take a stance again. But again, this isn't an essay. This isn't, the GMO thing. This is a quick few sentences of how you feel. Is it worth it? Is it not? Right. Some people can go for the pro pesticides. So go for that. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, because pesticides are useful, even though they could be dangerous. They are very useful. So that's what you're going to do. You're going to look one up, see which one that speaks to you, write what it's intended to do, its benefits and its costs, and pick a stance. Is it a good or a bad idea to use this thing? How can we regulate it, kind of thing? Just a paragraph, which is 4 or 5 sentences. You don't have to get crazy on this one. Welcome back. You got a half hour to look through this stuff and do this stuff. Continue monitoring your grades. Continue communicating with me, sending me private messages if you have any problems. I still have one more column, a writing to grade, which I'm going to do today or tonight. So look at that. That's going to be your grade. I have to count. Do I have my Power School up? No, I don't have my Power School up. But what I'm going to do is we'll look at that. Keep that in mind. The grades. I think after the column, I think that's going to be it. Maybe this one. If we don't have 9 up there right now, then I'm going to include today. If we do have 9, I'm going to cut it off there for this cycle. and I'm going to use this and the remaining stuff for fourth cycle. So that is what we've got going on. I would like to say what you see up there now is going to be it for the grades, except for the one more grade I have to put in from last week. And that's it. So keep an eye on it. Let me know. And if there's any problems, private message me. Talk to your friends. Make sure they're logging on. Keep signing in. I don't know. We got till at least May 15th. And there are some districts that are shutting it down for the year. So I hope I get to see you guys again a little bit. I will talk to you soon. Be safe. Be calm. Be smart.